Now let's talk a little bit about your campaign. I mean, funding a campaign is always difficult, but I know that you're making great use of the internet. How are you doing that?
Right. Well, I'm sure you've heard of the popular networking group, website Facebook.
Sure.
Without question, I've used YouTube. I've used things like that. You know, if you search Gus Khouri on YouTube, all of my policy videos will come up. There's 3 of them right now. One for my trifold platform. And I mean, without question, yeah, it's been very, very beneficial, and it really costs absolutely nothing. I've been able through things like Facebook to be able to I've been able to network with people across the country. You know, I have people in from Vancouver to Quebec City telling me, "We're rooting for you, Gus. Way to go. We like what you stand for." Things like that. You know, the people I would have never met otherwise. So and then I go to some political rallies and things like that, and people are like, "Hey, you're Gus Khouri," and
wow.
So it's been actually a pretty absolutely very useful tool. But Pam, I have to say, I mean, one of the main things here, it doesn't matter. I mean, I could own every billboard in Canada and every newspaper in Canada and constantly pump out my message, but people are not going to pay attention unless you're saying something worthwhile. I think ultimately, I mean, yes, I've used, you know, I'm mass emailing, I'm making YouTube videos, but ultimately it's the message behind what I'm saying that's really getting people to sort of respond positively to my message. They're happy with what I'm saying.
You also talk about your campaign as being a grassroots campaign. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, largely, you mentioned yourself. I mean, I'm fairly young. The majority of the people on my campaign tend to be people who don't have a tremendous political experience. So these are people who really don't pay attention to federal politics, and now it's become front and center in their lives. You know, we're living it, and these are people who had come from all various backgrounds, and now this has become the large aspect in their life. So I mean, it's basically I think spontaneity is the start. I mean, where did this guy come from? Well, that's basically it. You know, I'm a citizen of Canada. I have every right to run for Parliament. I want to exercise that right. And I think people like that, and that's I'm getting people behind me who traditionally were not, you know, targeting specific demographics that traditionally were not part of, you know, very involved with politics.
You talk about the people that are saying they're going to support you. Are you only or getting mostly young people, or do you think you're appealing to the middle age or the senior voter at all?
You know, I think it'd be so wrong to ever say that I speak on behalf of the youth demographic. They're just as diverse as anybody else. What I'd like to say is that I represent the modern Canadian. Okay, I represent what the modern Canadian believes, and I've looked at this country from top to bottom, what we stand for, and how we differ from many other countries that are similar. You know, from far away, someone might look at Canada and think that we're the exact same as the United States, but I have an insider perspective. I see where we stand, and I see what our values are, and then those are the values that I want to empower, that I want to ensure remain the way they are. And so no, I think that you know, my personality, my profile, and my platform caters to Canadians across the board. The modern Canadian is who I really relate to.
I went on your website and I looked at some of the information that you had there. You stated that our current government has become oblivious to what you were taught in elementary school about what this country means. And you say they are attempting to steer us down on a dangerous path. What do you mean by that?
Well, basically, I mean, we kind of we're seeing the true colors of Stephen Harper. We're seeing where he's taking us, okay? And you just had a guest on who said when George Bush says jump, he says how high, and I think that's basically you know, what we're seeing. And I think we're, you know, from when I reference elementary school, I remember in elementary school, you know, it was very clean cut. You know, you put your tins in the blue bin and you divide, and you know, and it's very simple. I mean, the environmental issue from day one has been ingrained in the Canadian in the Canadian psyche. And here we are, you know, the leader of our country is basically sitting back and saying that he will not do anything about the most relevant issue, the most important issue right now federally, the environmental issue. He's saying, I'm going to wait till China gets on board, until India gets on board, until everybody under the sun gets on board before we finally step forward and do our part on this issue. So, you know, that's basically what it is. You know, you need to take leadership. This is something that's very important to Canadians, and we have to be front and center on this.
Now, you talked about on your website that you recently attended the Ontario Liberal Party's annual meeting in Huntsville. Right. What was that like for you? Was that the first time you'd done anything like that? And what was that like for you?
Well, I was pretty involved with the provincial campaign, and I've been to a number of political rallies now in general. Having lived in Ottawa, I mean, that, you know, politics is sort of, they're as thick with politics. I mean, every day there's some new politician on campus talking about something or other. But you know, yeah, that was definitely a unique experience. I went on behalf of the Liberal community. So it was my first official role on representing the Liberal community. I was a delegate. I was one of a number of delegates representing the Riding of Newmarket-Aurora to the federal Liberals. So it was actually federal. It was a federal kind of meeting of all the ridings in Ontario, and it was a very unique experience for me. It felt great. I really liked that role, and it sort of drove me a little bit closer to my ultimate role of representing the Liberals here in Ottawa.
Now you've alluded to what some of the issues are for you, and you've said very well how passionate you are about them. And you make that point really clear that the issues that there are some issues that are just so important to you. Let's talk about them. I went on your website. You talked about the representation of youth in politics, foreign policy.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, my campaign is trifold. There's basically three very important issues that I'm running on. First and foremost, as I mentioned, the environmental issue. With my unique background, I think that's something that I have a good grasp of, and I have some very relevant information to add to that discussion on behalf of the people of Newmarket-Aurora. Second of all is foreign policy. Absolutely. I mean, we keep talking. I mean, it's the 50th anniversary of Lester B. Pearson,
yes,
the first and only Canadian to get a Nobel Peace Prize. And here we are. The federal government makes no mention of it. The Conservatives have made no mention of it. It's gone completely under the radar. This is a huge event. It's something that we should be very proud of. And I think we should get back after that. We should be back on the peace, playing that peacekeeping role internationally. And believe it or not, Pam, there's less than 200 Canadian peacekeepers right now as part of the UN mission. We are the lowest. We had the lowest number of peacekeepers part of any UN mission in the United Nations among any of the Western nations right now, of the industrialized nations.
I had no idea.
And here we are telling the rest of the world that we're a peacekeeping nation. Okay, that is our legacy. We have been a peacekeeping nation, but we are no longer. We are falling away from that, and people don't see us peacekeepers. But they hear about us in a combative role in Afghanistan. For the first time, Canadians are fighting in Afghanistan, and we are no longer peacekeepers. So if that's something that that's something that this nation was built upon. That's one of the, as I mentioned earlier, standing on the shoulders of giants. Well, Lester B. Pearson put us on the map for peacekeeping, and we need to get back on that and fulfill that role.
I have to agree with you. I think that we as Canadians see ourselves as peacekeepers, and certainly we're moving away from that role. Got to go for a break. When we come back, I want to talk more about some of the issues that are important to you. We're going to be right back. Yeah, I think